I think if we're honest, many of us have experience with in-ear monitor systems, but we don't know the first thing about actually crafting a mix that's going to set us up for success. And I don't think there's any shame in that. It's something that's deceptively simple, I think. So here are 5 tips that I give my worship team on how to craft an in-ear monitor mix that works. Hi, I'm Dave Dolphin at practicalworshipblog.com, sharing ideas, tips, and practical advice for the everyday worship leader. And on this channel, we have weekly videos that help you lead a worship band and be a leader of people. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. The process of going from floor wedges or speakers on the stage that are pointed at the musician to in-ear monitors, which is essentially using headphones to hear yourself, can at first be a little daunting. It sounds way different than just a speaker in front of you. You hear every little nuance and every little mistake in the performance, and in most cases, you have one of these little mixers and you're responsible for crafting your own mix. So here's 5 tips on how you can approach crafting a mix that's going to give you everything you need. Number 1, don't mix for the radio, mix for a band member. Your mix doesn't need to sound like the radio, and your mix doesn't need to sound like you're in the congregation running front of house and hearing everything. Your mix needs to be functional, and that means that there might be things on the stage that aren't necessarily in your mix. Now, everyone wants themselves more prominent in their mix, but your in-ear monitor mix should be more intentional than just an overall mix of the band and then yourself turned up a little bit. Number 2, mix for your category. There are certain musicians on the stage that just feed off one another. Drums and bass are always going to be locked in together. Guitar players and keyboard players need to make sure they're not stepping on each other's toes, and singers need to blend with one another. If you're a bass player, you're probably going to have a lot of drums in your mix and vice versa, but you probably don't need a lot or any background vocals in your mix. And for the singers, you probably need to hear all of the vocalists so you can blend together, and then maybe 1 or 2 of the rhythm instruments so you can hear the chord, but you probably don't need to hear the ear candy that the lead electric guitar player is playing. Number 3, look for things to turn down. You know how when you're on an airplane and they're talking about locating the nearest exit in case of an emergency, and they make it a point to remind you that the closest exit might actually be behind you. And that's because the obvious solution may not be right in front of you. When you're crafting a mix and you can't hear something, what do you naturally do? You typically turn it up. But the problem is that as you keep turning things up, eventually you run out of room and you hit a ceiling. The knob might physically have more room to turn, but you're not gonna make that instrument any louder. The mix itself has hit a wall, especially on these little personal mixers. I find that the ceiling is quite low. So I tell my band members if they can't hear something that instead of turning it up, listen for what's in the way and turn that down. Number 4, use panning. Panning is the ability to make something louder or softer in your left ear or your right ear. It gives your brain the ability to place things on an invisible stage within a sonic space. Now, it's like salt. A little bit goes a long way. Just bumping something a little bit to the left or to the right is going to help your brain to distinguish between those 2 instruments. Things like drums and bass and probably yourself, I keep those right in the center, but panning the rest of the band, moving them a little bit to the left and to the right, can bring some clarity to all the instruments in your mix. You can pan based on stage layout. For example, if your keyboard player is to your right, well then maybe you pan that instrument to the right. Or you can pan based on category and then balance and complement. For example, if you have 2 electric guitar players, maybe you pan 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Again, I would avoid hard panning, which is putting something just in your left ear or just in your right ear. Think of that pan knob as a way to point to things on an invisible stage. On that stage, some things might be right in the center, some things might be a little bit to the left, and some things might be far, far right. Number 5, use a room mic to connect with your congregation. In-ear monitors are exceptional at reducing outside noise, but this can be both a blessing and a curse. It can allow you to put just what you want in your mix without any bleed on the stage, but it also can make you feel cut off from the rest of the world and isolated from the congregation you're trying to lead. So what we do is we have 2 room mics. Now, some people will set up a pair of microphones on the stage and point those towards the congregation. We have 2 microphones at the back of the room that are pointing back at the stage. stage. The primary reason for these microphones is to add life back into our broadcast mix, but you can also use them to add life back into your in-ear monitor mix. If you're feeling disconnected from everything, resist the urge to take one ear out. It's actually really bad on your hearing. And it has to do with binaural summation, which is your brain's ability to perceive loudness when something hits both ears at the same time versus just one ear. I'm going to link up a couple of blog posts that go into a little bit more detail down below, but just don't do it. And a bonus tip is to save your settings. Now that you've spent all this time crafting the perfect in-ear monitor mix, save it. Store it. Most of these little personal mixers, like the Avion and the Behringer P16, have the ability to save up to 16 unique settings. So each of our musicians has their own mix stored, their own settings, and we label their number on the back of the unit. So after a weekend, we save the last musician's mix, so it's ready for them the next time they play, and we recall the mix for the next weekend's musician. I've created a playlist of some examples of in-ear monitor mixes, and I'll link that up right about here and put it in the description down below. Some of them are from other local churches. Some of them are from the band Third Day. One of them's actually from The Edge and U2. At the end of the day, the best in-ear monitor mix is going to be the one that you're the most comfortable with. There's not a right way or a wrong way to do this, but hopefully this gets you pointed in the right direction, discovering what is going to make you the most comfortable when you sing or when you play. For more videos just like this one, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And check out our small little ebook called 20 Things I Wish I Knew 20 Years Ago. It's the advice that I've learned over the last 20 years of doing music ministry, and you can download it right now for free at practicalworshipblog.com.